Hello everyone, and it is that time yet again to talk about my favourite movies of the past year. And I have to admit that 2017 was a pretty damn good year for movies. I mean, yeah, obviously you have some pieces of shit like the Emoji Movie and The Mummy, but overall, it was a really good year, and I will go as far to say it was one of the best years for film we've had in a long time. Now, most of you should know how this works by now, but for those of you that don't, I do have a few things to make clear before I get into the list. The first thing is that this is my personal opinion. If one of my choices doesn't agree with yours per se, then I'm sorry, I'm not psychic. And besides, this is my personal opinion, and this is all depending on what movies I thought were the most entertaining, which leads on to my second point, which is that the rating that I gave a movie only plays a very small factor into where the movie is actually placed on this list. The main two factors that I actually take into account are how entertaining did I think the movie was, and how much rewatchability do I think it has. Apart from that, the actual rating I gave a movie only plays about 10%, I would say, as to where it's actually placed on the list. My third point is that I didn't see every movie that was released in 2017. There were some movies that came out in the UK that I really wanted to see but unfortunately didn't get a chance to, such as It and The Florida Project. I really wanted to see those movies, but unfortunately I couldn't. And there are other movies that will definitely be on other people's best of the year lists, but unfortunately haven't even come out in the UK yet, and they won't do until later on in 2018. And these movies in particular that I'm talking about are Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri and The Shape of Water. I really want to see those movies, but unfortunately they haven't come out in the UK yet. And finally, my fourth point is, of course, I have honourable mentions this year, and this year I have actually got quite a few, so without any further ado, these are my honourable mentions for 2017. The Disaster Artist, Wonder Woman, Detroit, John Wick Chapter 2, Spider-Man Homecoming, and Star Wars The Last Jedi. I just want to emphasise, they are all fantastic movies, and I still think you should give them a chance if you haven't seen any of them. But unfortunately, they were this close to making the list, and they just didn't in the end. I still think they are really good movies, though. So, now that that is all out of the way, let's get into my favourite movies of 2017 with number 10. I agree with everyone else by saying that Split is M. Night Shyamalan's best movie in years. And for me that's not saying much, seeing that the only other M. Night Shyamalan movie that I've seen is The Happening. So I went into this movie with pretty low expectations, and I came out of it kind of loving this movie. Everything about this movie fits into place in just the right way, and it is just a really good and entertaining movie that I will happily watch again. But I think we can all agree this movie would be nowhere near as good as it was if it wasn't for James McAvoy's fantastic lead performance that might actually be my favourite performance of the entire year. And that's saying something, seeing that this year we had loads and loads of great performances. T2 Trainspotting is a movie that I actually didn't expect to make the list, despite how much praise I gave it in my initial review. And the main reason I say that is because it came out so early on in the year, I just thought I would forget about it by this time. But I didn't. I come back to this movie time and time again, and I still find it just as enjoyable to watch as I did the first time. Whether it's as good as the first one or not, I don't know, that's up for debate, and part of me does think that it is slightly better than the first movie. But that's kind of a hard thing to say because they're both tackling completely different subject matter. And one thing that I absolutely loved about this movie is the way it tackled old friends meeting up and how you choose to look back at memories with those friends. And I thought that was a really nice touch, this movie, and kind of subverted my expectations a little. I went in thinking it was going to be a rehash of the 90s movie, but instead it wasn't. They went completely different directions that I honestly wasn't expecting, and Danny Boyle's direction is spot on. For me personally, Good Time was the biggest surprise of the year. I had heard some generally good things about this movie, but in my head, I went into this movie absolutely not knowing what to expect whatsoever, and I came out of it absolutely loving it. There are just so many things that I love about this movie, from the frenetic and very urgent cinematography and direction to Robert Pattinson's fantastic lead performance. Everything just works about this movie, and the fact that it just kind of never lets up and it's just constantly fast-paced and frenetic is probably the reason why I love it even more. I mean, there are so many ways they could have gone with this movie, and instead they choose a completely different direction and go for the ballsiest option possible, which I think pays off in the end. If you haven't seen Good Time, then I highly recommend you check it out, because I think it went under quite a few people's radars in 2017. And it's a real shame, because it's easily one of the most thrilling and straight up entertaining movies that I saw all year. My choice for number 7 is the only animated movie to make this list, and to be honest, the only animated movie that I reviewed all year, which, don't worry, I will rectify in 2018. But nonetheless, my choice for number 7 is... I'm probably the only person that's going to have this movie on their best of the year list, but I have every reason to. No other movie made me laugh as much as the Lego Batman movie did. I was laughing consistently from start to finish, and it just felt like there was a joke every single second. And that's kind of why I love this movie, besides the fact that you have great voice acting and really, really impressive animation on show. It's just the humour that, for me, stood out the most. I honestly could watch this movie time and time again and still find new things to love about this movie and jokes that I didn't see before, which is why I love this movie as much as I did. War for the Planet of the Apes did something that very few third movies in a trilogy can do, and that is be as good as the previous two movies in that trilogy. I would easily say that this Planet of the Apes trilogy is up there with the likes of the Bourne trilogy and the Lord of the Rings as some of the flat-out best trilogies ever made, where you have a 1-2-3 hit combo that all manage to work on their own, but work together as well. This movie was really good. Matt Reeves directed the shit out of it with some incredible scenery and some impressive CGI. Michael Giacchino's score is amazing. I mean, that man can do no wrong when it comes to scoring a movie. I think his score for this movie is exceptional. And I just thought this was a really fitting end to the Planet of the Apes trilogy. I just think they got everything right in this movie. I know some people may have got bored with it and were kind of disappointed by the fact that it's called War for the Planet of the Apes, but there isn't really a war until the last 20 or so minutes. And I can completely understand that, but when you look at this movie from the point of view that this is not just a physical war, this is more of a mental and psychological war within Caesar and the other apes, then it starts to become something completely different, and then you can appreciate it on an entirely new level. I think we can all agree that Get Out is a really good movie, but I was not expecting it to be as good as this. Jordan Peele's direction is just fantastic. From the moment the movie starts, you can tell that this is going to be a pretty tense horror thriller combo. But as the movie progresses, there's just this sense of unease and unsettling, just something that's not quite right, that is in the back of your head. And as you're watching the movie, it's very clear that that's exactly what he was going for, whereby some of the shots are not quite lined up as you usually expect, or people act a very peculiar way. Everything just seems a little bit out of place, and it just makes the whole tone of the movie that much more believable and interesting. I love what James Mangold did with this movie. He could have very easily gone down a very generic and cliched path, but he didn't. Instead, what we get is one of the most brutal and emotional movies of the year, with a tone and look to it that feels a lot more like a Western than it actually does a superhero movie. And that's what makes Logan one of my favourite superhero movies probably ever. And I know that's a bold statement, but I loved it the first time I saw it, and I've loved it every other time that I've seen it. The ending still makes me cry loads. I am not ashamed to admit that. And Hugh Jackman gives probably the best performance of his entire career. And I thought he was amazing in Prisoners and even better in Les Mis. But here, he completely knocks it out of the park. So does Patrick Stewart, and so does the little girl Daphne Keane. Just everything about this movie was 100% satisfying as a fan of the character, and I thought it was the best possible send-off Wolverine could have got. Was he slow? Retarded isn't slow. Was he slow? As you can tell, Baby Driver is my choice for number 3. I mean, Edgar Wright can do no wrong. This man knows how to direct movies. Yeah, it could be argued to be style over substance, but when his style is kind of what makes his movies so good, I just kind of have to beg to differ. I've loved all of his movies, and I think this is another fantastic piece of filmmaking right here. I still think Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is the better movie, but Baby Driver is just as fun and just as entertaining. Despite not being the deepest movie of the year, I still think for an action entertainment value, I think it did its job as best as it could have done. The soundtrack was fantastic. I cannot get the soundtrack out of my head. As soon as I saw the movie, I immediately bought it on CD, and I've been replaying that shit constantly throughout 2017. All of the acting was really good, but it's Edgar Wright's direction that keeps me coming back to this movie. The fact that the majority of it was in camera just made everything that whole lot more believable, and just that whole lot more cooler. What can I say about Blade Runner 2049 that hasn't already been said? The cinematography is stunning. It's easily one of the best looking movies I have ever seen in my entire life. The soundtrack was incredibly euphoric, the acting was great, and the story was so unpredictable that I had no idea where it was going to go, and kept me on my toes throughout the entire runtime. So from a technical and filmmaking standpoint, yeah, Blade Runner 2049 is definitely the best movie of the year. But the reason it's not number 1 is because it's not my favourite movie of the year. My favourite movie of the year and my choice for number 1, in fact, goes to... That's right, Dunkirk is my favourite movie of 2017. It was just relentless, it was brutal, and it's the only movie that I saw twice in the cinema, and I've watched it again since at home, and even though it doesn't have the same impact as it does when watching it on a huge screen with loud speakers, I still feel like I'm with those soldiers on the beach in this hectic situation every time I watch it. And no other movie this year made me feel as on edge and as tense as Dunkirk did. Yes, this is truly an experience of a movie that you must watch on a big screen as possible. But I just had to put it at number 1 because both times that I saw it in the cinema, it just completely blew me away. The first time I saw it, I was like, that was incredible. And the second time I saw it, I just thought to myself, that was even more incredible. Yes, it is light on character development, but when you really look at the movie and see what Christopher Nolan was going for, that's not the point. He wanted to put the audience in there with the soldiers and make them empathise with them that way, instead of having them talk about their family at home, which is the more generic route. I really like the non-linear things that he did with this movie, and Hans Zimmer's score was just so good. It was so good. So guys, those were my favourite movies of 2017. I hope you enjoyed it. If you disagree with some of my choices, then I'm sorry, I can't cater to everyone, and like I did say at the start of the video, these are my personal opinions, so they are placed on this list depending on how much I enjoyed them. Also, for those of you that might be wondering why everything looks a little bit bigger and I seem a bit closer to the camera, that's because I am filming with a brand new wide angle lens, and I really like it. It means I can get closer to the camera, and it doesn't mean that the camera has to be on the other side of the room, because before I used this lens, I was instead using a standard lens that comes with the DSLR, which means the camera had to be on the other side of the room for me to get a decent shot. Now, I can have it right next to me, and everything's just a whole lot easier and nicer, and there's more in the shot, which I like. But yeah, this is how it's going to be from now on, and I hope you guys like it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for making 2017 one of the best years that I've ever had on YouTube. I mean, I can't thank you guys enough for 100 subscribers. If you enjoyed this video, then give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Bye.